So our topic for today will be all about post-employment benefits. So what are these post-employment benefits? So post-employment benefits, these are benefits which are payable after completion of employment. Kaya sila natawag na post-employment benefits because these benefits are normally received after employment. Okay? So these include retirement benefits such as pensions and lump sum payments on retirement. No pa? Post-employment life insurance and post-employment medical care. Okay? So these post-employment benefits are normally formal arrangement between an employer entity and the employees because these are usually established as part of the remuneration package for its employees. Meaning, if you will apply for a job and just in case you are yung tipo bang na-hire ka nung kumpanya na yon, see to it that these post-employment benefits is normally part of the remuneration package na ibibigay sa'yo ng company. But some are informal as evidenced only by the entity's practice to pay post-employment benefits. Meaning, hearsay lang, parang ganun. Okay? So, these post-employment benefits may be contributory or non-contributory. Pwede rin silang funded or unfunded. And then last but not the least, these may be classified as defined contribution plans and defined benefit plans. We good? So let's just start with the discussion of contributory or non-contributory. When can we say that these post-employment benefits are contributory at kailan sila nagiging non-contributory? Okay? So these post-employment benefits are contributory or said to be a contributory plan if the employer and the employee make contributions to the retirement benefit plan but they do not necessarily contribute equal amounts. Worded in another way, both employer and employee share in the retirement benefit cost. So kapag sinabi natin contributory plan, see to it that even the employee is required to contribute to the fund. So meron din siyang share dun sa cost of pension or cost of post-employment benefits. On the other hand, these post-employment benefits are said to be non-contributory if only the employer makes contributions to the retirement benefit plan. Meaning, right, the employer shoulders all the retirement benefit cost. Meaning, the employee is not required to contribute any amount here under a non-contributory plan. Okay? Next, let's discuss kung kailan sila nagiging funded or unfunded. Well, these post-employment benefits are said to be funded if the entity sets aside funds for future retirement benefits by making payments to a funding agency. So, what is this funding agency? Well, funding agency is the one responsible for the accumulation of funds and for making payments to the retired employees when the benefits become due. So, we are hiring a funding agency here and normally that funding agency is the one responsible growing the money that is put to the fund, right? Habang hindi pa yun pinambabayad sa ating mga empleyado. And this funding agency is also the one responsible, right, when the payment is already due to the employees. Okay? Next, what is funding? Well, funding is actually the transfer of assets to an entity called the retirement fund, which is once again managed by the funding agency, no? Which is separate from the reporting entity for the purpose of meeting obligations arising from the retirement benefit plan. Ang ibig lang naman sabihin yan, kapag sinabi nating funded yung plan, we are actually segregating or we are actually contributing to the retirement fund so that we are sure that on the date wherein these benefits will become due, meron tayong pambayad sa ating mga empleyado. Okay? Well, these post-employment benefits are said to be unfunded on the other hand if the entity retains the obligation for the payment of retirement benefits without the establishment of a separate fund. Here in unfunded plan, ang ibig lang naman sabihin is bahala na si Batman. Saka na natin problemahin yan kapag due na talaga or kailangan na nating magbayad. Okay? Then last but not the least, these post-employment benefits may be a defined contribution plan or a defined benefit plan. So start tayo sa defined contribution plan. Okay? So defined contribution plan is actually a post-employment benefit plan under which an entity pays fixed contributions into a separate entity known as the fund. Meaning, the entity will have no legal or constructive obligation to pay further contributions if the fund does not hold sufficient assets to pay all employee benefits relating to employee service in the current or prior periods. Worded in another way, after contributing these fixed amounts, right, wala nang pakialam yung employer natin. Okay? Wala nang pakialam yung company. This entity or this employer will no longer have legal or constructive obligation to pay further contribution just in case malugi yung fund. Because once again, this fund will be managed by the funding agency. And since these funds will be invested habang hindi pa sila ginagamit, possible na kumita at possible na malugi. So just in case malugi, see to it that under the defined contribution plan, the employer is no longer obliged to contribute more cash. Paliwanag ba? So here in defined contribution plan, see to it that the contribution, once again, the contribution is definite, right? So meron lang fixed amount of contribution, but the benefit is indefinite again. But the definite is indefinite. Ibig sabihin, the amount of benefit that the employees may receive under a defined contribution plan, right, may range from small to a big amount. Nakadepende yun, syempre, sa funding agency. Okay? So here, in defined contribution plan, the entity makes the contributions to a trustee which administers, once again, manages and invests the funds. And then the employee's retirement benefit will depend on how the plan has been managed by these trustee or by the funding agency. Okay? So if the plan provides exceptional investment performance, the employee will share in the gain in the form of, sabihin na nating, larger retirement benefits. That is why sabi ko kanina, the benefit here is actually indefinite. But if the plan does poorly, the employee will share in the loss by receiving a smaller retirement plan. So, ibig lang sabihin ngayon dito, in a defined contribution plan, the employees, once again, the employees bear the risk of loss or the investment risk. Right? So, mga empleyado yung nagbe-bear nung tinatawag natin na investment risk. So, kapag nalugi, tiba-tiba ang mga empleyado. Pero kapag kumita, tiba-tiba ang mga empleyado. Pero kapag nalugi, kawawa sila. Okay? So, here in defined contribution plan, always remember that there are no actuarial assumptions to measure the contribution and there is no possibility of any actuarial gain or loss. So, actuarial gain or loss is only possible when we are solving a defined benefit plan. But here in defined contribution plan, right, there will be no actuarial assumption. And if there will be no actuarial assumptions, there will be no possibility as well of any actuarial gain or loss. Okay? So, what are the procedures here in defined contribution plan? Actually, simple procedures lang to. So, meron tayong tinatawag na SORIA notes here in defined contribution plan. Okay? So, SORIA notes, number 1. What is the first SORIA notes natin? See to it here that the required contribution, once again, the required contribution shall be recognized. Once again, shall be recognized as expense in the period payable. Once again, in the period payable. So, if this contribution is already payable this year, the amount of expense will be equal to the required contribution. Regardless kung magkano man yung binayad ng employer. So, just in case that the required contribution is 100,000, the expense for that year is 100,000. Regardless if the employer, sabihin na natin, contributed 50,000 or 120,000. Whether mas mababa or mas malaki, 100 ang ating i-expense. Okay? Number 2, if the required contribution, once again, if the required contribution is actually higher than the actual contribution, see to it here that there will be, what? There will be accrued expense, which is tatawagin nating accrued benefit cost. So, we need to recognize a liability account, which is tatawagin nating accrued benefit cost. Maliwanag? But, if the required contribution is actually lower, no, than the actual contribution, sobra yung ating binayad. So, if sobra yung ating kinontribute, here, we need to recognize an asset, which is yung tinatawag natin na prepaid benefit expense or prepaid benefit cost. Okay? So, if the actual contribution is lower, there will be a liability. But if the actual contribution is higher, we'll need to recognize an asset. So, to put into problems all these concepts, let's now move on here in illustrative problem number 1. So, here in illustrative problem number 1, Rain is a member of the faculty member or a faculty of the College of Accountancy at University of Santo Tomas. During the current year, Rain earned 840,000. Rain is covered by the university's defined contribution plan, which requires the university to contribute the equivalent of 5% of Rain's salary of 42,000 for the current year to the trustee. So what's the requirement here? The requirement is the entry to record the contribution. Once again, if the required contribution is actually 5% of 840,000 or 42,000, that 42,000 is the amount to be recognized as expense. So the journal entry here is just to debit employee benefit expense. Again, debit employee benefit expense equal to 42,000 pesos, and then credit cash equal to 42,000 pesos. And then that's it, no? Ganun lang kadali ang defined contribution plan. Okay? Next, we'll move on here in illustrative problem number 2. So here in illustrative problem number 2, on January 31, 2018, Hilda Company paid 100,000 contribution to a defined contribution plan in exchange for services performed by the employees on December 31, 2017. So requirement number 1, what is the entry to record the accrual of benefit on December 31, 2017? See to it that on December 31, 2017, the journal entry is to debit employee benefit expense. Sir, why do we need to debit employee benefit expense equal to 100,000 at the end of 2017? That is because, as I said a while ago, the required contribution is actually the amount to be recognized as expense every year. So even though there is no payment yet as of 2017, we need to recognize expense already. Okay? Then the corresponding credit will be the accrued benefit expense because we did not pay the required contribution last year. Kailan lang natin binayaran? January 31 pa lang eh. So, as of the end of 2017, meron muna tayong utang and that's equal to 100,000. Okay? And then requirement number 2, what is the entry to record the payment of the contribution on January 31, 2018? So, on January 31, 2018, the journal entry is to debit accrued benefit expense and then to credit cash because finally, nagbayad na tayo and that's equal to 100,000. Okay? So, those are the journal entries here in illustrative problem number 2. Are we still good? Now, let's move on here in illustrative problem number 3. So, here in illustrative problem number 3, on December 31, 2017, Pepper Company paid 200,000 contribution to a defined contribution plan. Of this amount, 150,000 is in part exchanged for services performed by the employees in December 2017, and then the balance of 50,000 is in respect of services to be performed in 2018. So the required contribution is only 150,000 for the year 2017, but we paid a total of 200,000. So the requirement is the journal entry on December 31, 2017. So what's the journal entry? That is to debit employee benefit expense equal to 150,000 only because that is the required contribution. Okay? And then credit cash equal to the total payment of 200,000. And since the actual contribution is higher than the required contribution, we'll need to recognize an asset, and that's the prepaid benefit expense. So debit prepaid benefit expense, and that's equal to 50,000 pesos. Okay? Now, let's move on here in illustrative problem number 4. This is the last problem for defined contribution plan. Okay? So, here in illustrative problem number 4, Connor's retirement benefit plan provides for an annual contribution of 2 million to a fund held and managed by a third party. The fund is legally separate from the entity and is to be used solely for the retirement pay of employees. The amount to be received by a retiring employee is dependent on the amount of contributions and the investment income earned on those contributions. So if the amount to be received by the employees is dependent on the performance of the funding agency, this problem is with regards to what? To a defined contribution plan. Okay? Next, ano pang meron dito? The third-party trustee assumes the obligation of disbursing the funds to retiring employees. The entity made the following contributions to the fund. So the requirement here is to provide the entries to record the contributions and compute the employee benefit expense for the years ended 2021 up to 2023. See to it that employee benefit expense for the years ended December 31, 2021 up to 2023 is equal to 2 million pesos regardless kung magkano yung binayaran natin because an entity shall recognize an expense the required contribution. Okay? So for the year 2021, what will be the journal entry? The journal entry is to debit employee benefit expense equal to the required contribution of 2 million pesos and then credit accrued benefit expense equal to 2 million pesos as well because for the year 2021, we did not contribute anything. Okay? Now, for the year 2022, we contribute a total of 4.7 million. But still, the employee benefit expense will be recorded or will be debited to 2 million pesos only. Okay? But the credit will go, that will go to cash will be equal to 4.7 million. So here, before you recognize a prepaid benefit expense, they recognize first the accrued benefit expense equal to 2 million pesos. Okay? That's the accrued benefit expense at the beginning of 2022. And since there is still an excess of 700,000, we can debit it now to prepaid benefit expense. So, debit prepaid benefit expense equal to 700,000 pesos. Okay? Then lastly, for the year 2023, the journal entry is to debit employee benefit expense still equal to 2 million pesos. Then credit cash equal to how much? Equal to 1.2 million pesos only because we only contributed 1.2 million for the year 2023. Okay? Now, before we recognize accrued benefit expense, we should recognize first the prepaid benefit expense recorded last year. And that's equal to 700,000. So here, we can only recognize accrued benefit expense equal to 100,000 pesos. So for the year 2023, we'll now have an accrued benefit expense equal to 100,000 pesos. Okay? So that's defined contribution plan. Next, punta tayo sa defined benefit plan. So defined benefit plan is simply defined as a post-employment benefit plan other than a defined contribution plan. So this is actually a residual definition. Okay? So here, the entity's obligation is actually to provide the agreed benefits to employees because if under a defined contribution plan, kanina, kung mapapansin mo kanina, no, in a defined contribution plan, the benefits are indefinite here. In a defined benefit plan, kaya siya natawag na defined benefit because here, the benefits are actually what? The benefits are the one definite, right? And then apparently, here, the entity's obligation is to provide the agreed benefits to employees, meaning the contribution here is the one that is indefinite. So, kabaliktaran siya ng defined contribution plan. Okay? So, the employee here or the employees are guaranteed a specific or definite amount of benefits which is usually related to their salary and years of service. So, the benefit here are once again definite but the contributions are indefinite. Okay? The entity must make contributions such that the contributions plus earnings would be sufficiently large to cover future retirement benefits. So, the entity or the employer here, what? The employer bears the risk of loss or the investment risk. Okay? So, sir, anong ibig mo sabihin dyan? Well, ang ibig ko lang sabihin dito is that kapag maganda ang pamamalakad ng funding agency, the employer here can take a contribution holiday. Pwedeng wag muna siyang mag-contribute. Pero kapag nalulugi, yung contribution ng employer, kailangan pa niyang dagdagan. Okay? So, si employer ang magbe-bear ng risk of loss. So here in a defined benefit plan, always remember that actuarial assumptions are required to measure the obligation and the expense. And there is a possibility of actuarial gains and losses. So this is a bit complicated as compared to the defined contribution plan. Okay? So the expense recognized here is not necessarily the amount of contribution for the period, because the expense here is computed differently as regards to the defined contribution plan. Are we good? So here meron tayong SORYA notes again. So sir, what are our SORYA notes? So number 1 muna tayo. Number 1 is the difference between the plan assets. Again, meron tayong tinatawag na plan assets. And then later, i-discuss ko yung isa pa, which is the projected benefit obligation. Okay? So what are these plan assets? Plan assets is actually the source of fund set aside in meeting future benefit payments. So ito yung fund na sinegregate natin pambayad ng post-employment benefits. So what's the measurement of these plan assets? These plan assets are normally measured at fair value. Again, these plan assets are measured at fair value. That is why these plan assets are normally called fair value of plan assets or FVPA. So later, FVPA ang itatawag natin sa mga to. Next, punta tayo sa number 2. Number 2 will be the projected benefit obligation, or yung tatawagin naman natin na PBO. So what is this projected benefit obligation? Well, projected benefit obligation, from the word itself, this is a projected amount, meaning this is the actuarial present value of all benefits attributed to the pension or by the pension benefit formula to employee service rendered before a specified date based on future compensation level. Worded in another way, projected benefit obligation is just the estimate of the amount of obligation of the employer to the employees. And of course, this is based on the employee's remuneration package. Okay? So nakabase yan sa compensation level ng ating mga empleyado. Okay? So sir, bakit mo kailangan i-discuss yung FVPA at PBO na yan? Because here in our notes number 3, FVPA is actually compared to the PBO. Sir, why do we need to compare these two? Because once again, by comparing these two, mako-compute natin yung prepaid benefit cost at saka yung accrued benefit cost. So if the FVPA is higher than the PBO, ibig sabihin yan mas mataas or mas malaki yung fair value ng plan assets natin as compared to the estimate of our liability. So, if that's the case, see to it that we'll need to recognize what? We need to recognize prepaid benefit expense. So, ganito na computein, no, yung prepaid benefit expense natin. But if the projected benefit obligation is higher than the fair value of plan assets, always remember here na mas malaki yung utang natin. That's why we'll need to recognize a liability, and that's the accrued benefit expense. So this is the computation of prepaid benefit expense and accrued benefit expense under a defined benefit plan. Are we good? Next, SORYA notes number 4, we'll need to compute what? We'll need to compute the employee benefit cost. So sir, ano po yung employee benefit cost na to? Well, employee benefit cost is the total cost of giving post-employment benefits to the employees. So here, under a defined benefit plan, see to it that employee benefit cost will go to profit or loss and OCI. Parehong P&L and OCI. So sir, ano yung pumapasok sa P&L? Yung pumapasok sa P&L is yung tinatawag natin na employee benefit expense, right? And then the amount that is to be included in the other comprehensive income is yung tinatawag naman natin na remeasurements. Okay? So once again, employee benefit expense will be part of the profit or loss, meaning net income computation, but remeasurements will be part of other comprehensive income. Are we good on that? Hopefully, okay tayo dun, no? Now, punta tayo sa SORYA notes number 5. SORYA notes number 5, how can we compute employee benefit expense? So, employee benefit expense is actually just equal, no, to the service cost. Again, this is just equal to the service cost plus what we call the net interest. So, kailangan nating malaman ano yung mga kasama sa service cost at net interest in order for us to compute the employee benefit expense. So, listen very carefully. Because kapag na-gets mo yung mga concepts, madali na lang mag-solve dito. Okay? So, Sorianotes number 6, anong laman ng service cost? So, kapag sinabi nating service cost, meron tong tatlong laman eh. Sir, ano yung tatlong laman yan? First is yung tinatawag natin na current service cost. Current service cost. Second is yung tinatawag naman natin na past service cost. Then, last but not the least, is yung tinatawag naman natin na gain or loss on early settlement. Because it is possible, no, na magkaroon ng early settlement of obligation. Okay? So, isa-isahin natin itong mga to. Current service cost is actually the cost to an entity under a defined benefit plan for service rendered by employees in the current year. This is with regards to the services employed by the employees for the current year. With regards to the past service cost, on the other hand, these costs are with regards to the services rendered by employees in the prior years naman. Yun lang naman ang pinagkaiba nilang dalawa. Basta lagi mong tatandaan, current service cost and past service cost are both part of the employee benefit expense. Other than being part of the employee benefit expense, always remember that current service cost and past service cost are actually item of the addition as well to what? To the projected benefit obligation. So, ina-add din po natin yan sa projected benefit obligation natin. Okay? Now, punta tayo sa pangatlo, which is the gain or loss on early settlement. So, gain or loss on early settlement can be computed by comparing what? By comparing what we call the settlement price and the what? Settlement price and the present value of obligation settled. So, i-compare natin yung settlement price at yung present value of obligation settled. Liwanag ba? So, ngayon ganito. If nagkaroon ng early settlement of obligation, see to it na mababawasan dapat yung utang natin. That is why present value of obligation settled is an item of deduction from the projected benefit obligation. Okay? Saan natin kukunin yung pambayad? Kukunin natin yung pambayad, syempre, sa FVPA or sa fair value of plan assets. That is why settlement price, on the other hand, is an item of deduction naman sa fair value of plan assets. So, dinideduct natin yan sa fair value of plan assets. Okay? So, ngayon, makinig. If the settlement price is higher than the present value of obligation settled, see to it here, nalugi tayo. Why? Because mas malaki yung binabayad natin compared sa utang natin. That's why here, we need to recognize loss on settlement. Okay? And then, loss on settlement is actually an item of addition, syempre, sa employee benefit expense. And then, if the present value of obligation settled is higher, dito naman nakasave tayo because 100,000, for example, utang natin, binayaran mo lang ng 80. So, meron naman tayong tinatawag na gain on settlement. Once again, employee benefit expense ang kinocompute dito. So, if we have gain on settlement, this must be what? This must be offset against the current service cost and the past service cost. You cannot add an expense and a gain. You can only add loss and expense, but you cannot add loss and expense and gain. Maliwanag ba? So, kapag loss, we can add it to past service cost and current service cost, pero kapag gain, i-deduct naman yan kasi hindi nila kamag-anak yung gain eh. Are we good? Now, let's move on to Sorianotes number 7. Sorianotes number 7 is the composition, no, of net interest. Okay? So, kapag sinabi natin net interest, this is just the difference between the interest expense and what? And the interest income. Okay? So, just get the difference between the interest expense and interest income, and then that's it, no? That's already the net interest. So, how can we compute interest expense and interest income? Well, interest expense, this is just equal to the projected benefit obligation at the beginning of the year times the discount rate. So, multiply mo lang yan sa discount rate and then that's it. On the other hand, interest income is equal to the fair value of plan assets beginning times discount rate pa din. Right? Ito yung kinaibahan ng bagong standard dun sa dating standard. Kasi dati, noong mga panahon ni Sir Jonathan, for example, joke lang, right? Dati kasi, right, ang ginagamit sa computation ng interest income is the desired rate of return or expected rate of return. Because itong interest income na to, yung old name niya, once again, its old name is actually what? Is actually expected return. Hindi talaga siya interest income dati. Expected return ang pangalan niyan dati. That is why, ang ginagamit natin dati is the rate of return. But after the amendment to the IAS 19, which is the standard we're using here, discount rate na rin daw po yung ginagamit. Okay? Now, ganito. Interest expense, aside from being part of the computation of employee benefit expense, this is actually an item of addition saan? Item of addition din po yan sa projected benefit obligation. While interest income is an item of deduction naman, or should I say addition, sa fair value of plan assets. So, ang interest expense, ina-add sa PBO, while ang interest income, ina-add naman sa FVPA. So, kapag nakuha mo na yung total service cost at yung net interest, just get the sum or the net between the two, and that's already the employee benefit expense. Okay? So, we're good with the employee benefit expense. Now, let's move on to remeasurements here in Sorya Notes number 8. So, Sorya Notes number 8 will be all about remeasurements. Again, this is all about remeasurements na. Okay? So, kapag sinabi nating remeasurements, right, these are actually the actuarial gains or losses plus the return on plan assets and the change in the effect of asset ceiling. So, based from the definition given by IAS 19R, there are 3 remeasurements na kailangan nating pag-usapan. First is yung tinatawag natin na actuarial gains or losses. Again, meron tayong tinatawag na actuarial gains or losses. Once again, here in defined benefit plan, we're using actuarial assumptions. That is why it is possible, no, for us to have actuarial gains or losses. Okay? So, actuarial gains or losses, these are actually changes in the present value of the defined benefit obligation, resulting from experience adjustments and the effects of changes in actuarial assumptions. Since our projected benefit obligation is just an estimate, there will be chances na mamamali yung estimate, or as time goes by, nakaka-receive tayo ng relevant information. That is why we need to remeasure the PBO. Okay? So, dalawa ngayon ang possible na maging source ng actuarial gains or losses. Una is experience adjustments. These are the adjustments from the differences between the previous actuarial assumption and what was actually occurred. Then second will be the actuarial assumptions. These are the entity's best estimate of the variables that will determine the ultimate cost of providing post-employment benefits. Okay? So here, there will be an actuarial gain. Again, there will be an actuarial gain if and only if nagkaroon ng decrease in PBO. Okay? Because if there will be a decrease in PBO, gusto natin yun kasi mababawasan yung utang natin. Okay? So, since merong decrease in PBO here in actuarial gain now is an item of deduction sa projected benefit obligation. Okay? On the other hand, there will be an actuarial loss if and only if there will be an increase in PBO. So, actuarial loss now, aside from being part of the total remeasurement, is actually an item of addition sa projected benefit obligation natin. So, that's the first item here in remeasurements. Okay? Next, punta tayo sa pangalawa. What's the second one? The second one is the gain or loss on returns. So, meron tayong tinatawag na gain or loss on returns on plan assets. Okay? So, sir, papaano po natin yan makukompute? Well, here, kailangan mo lang namang i-compare ang dalawang bagay. Ano yung dalawang bagay na kailangan natin i-compare? Una is yung tinatawag natin na interest income. Once again, interest income, yan yung tinatawag natin dati na what? Yan yung tinatawag natin dati na expected return. Liwanag ba? Sir, saan natin yan i-compare? I-compare natin yan sa actual return. Okay? So, this interest income will be compared to actual return. Liwanag ba? So, if the interest income is higher, once again, if the interest income is higher than the actual return, mas malaki yung ina-expect mong return compared dun sa actual, see to it here na meron tayong loss. On the other hand, if the actual return is higher than the interest income, meron naman tayong tatawaging gain. So, see to it that this loss is actually an item of deduction sa FVPA naman natin. Pero kapag gain tayo, item of addition naman yan sa FVPA. Sir, why? Because kanina yung interest income inad mo sa FVPA. So, if mataas yan compared sa actual, sobra yung inad mo, kaya kailangan nating magbawas. But if mas malaki yung actual, kulang pa yung naka-add, therefore, kailangan natin mag-add. Okay? So, yun yung pangalawang item na kailangan mong malaman. Then, last but not the least, medyo mahaba-haba itong pangalan nito, no? Last but not the least is yung tinatawag naman natin na change. Triangle is the symbol for change in economics. Okay? Change in the effect. Again, last but not the least, will be the change in the effect of asset ceiling. Again, change in the effect of asset ceiling, no? Net of interest. Huwag mong kakalimutan yung dulo, net of interest. Okay? So, sir, ano po ba yung asset ceiling na yan? Kailangan muna natin yung malaman, no? Bago natin ma-explain ito. Well, ganito kasi yan. Sabi natin kanina, kino-compare natin yung FVPA at saka yung what? At saka yung projected benefit obligation. So, let's say on January 1, 2020, and then on December 31, 2020, meron tayong FVPA equal to 10 million and 12 million respectively. PBO on the other hand is equal to 8 million and what? 8 million and 8.5 million respectively. So, if FVPA is higher, supposedly, meron tayong prepaid benefit expense dapat. Magkano at the beginning? At the beginning, we have prepaid benefit expense of 2 million. Then, apparently, at the end of the year, supposedly, dapat 3.5 million ito. So, we need to recognize an asset of 2 million and 3.5 million dapat. Kaso, anong meron? Naglagay ng asset ceiling. Sir, anong ibig sabihin ng asset ceiling? Well, asset ceiling, this is actually the prepaid benefit cost that will be recognized and must not exceed, right, this ceiling. Ibig sabihin, if the prepaid benefit cost computed a while ago is higher than the asset ceiling, we cannot recognize it fully. Because kaya nasabing ceiling, yan na yung maximum amount of asset na pwede nating i-recognize. Kaya siya natawag na asset ceiling. So, if asset ceiling is only equal to 1 million pesos and 2 million pesos, see to it na kapag tinanong tayo ng problem, how much is the prepaid benefit expense at the end of the year, our answer is 2 million pesos only, even though we computed a total of 3.5 million. Because maximum amount of asset that can be recognized is only 2 million pesos. Okay? So, yung tinatawag ngayon natin na effect of asset ceiling, once again, effect of asset ceiling now is the difference between the PBE computed and the asset ceiling itself. Okay? This is actually the amount that we cannot recognize as an asset. So, at the beginning of the year, we have 1 million. But at the end of the year, we have 1.5 million. Once again, the amount that will be included sa remeasurements will be the increase. So, how much will be the increase? The increase in the effect of asset ceiling is actually equal to 500,000. That is from 1 million to 1.5 million. So, the amount that will be included in remeasurement will be the amount net of interest. So, ibig sabihin dito, hatiin mo pa yan. Compute mo muna yung interest expense and then the residual amount will be the amount that will be part of OCI or remeasurement. So, itong residual na to, once again, yan yung part ng OCI natin, while itong interest expense na to, part pa din po yan ng employee benefit expense. Okay? So, how do we compute interest expense? Interest expense is just equal to the effect of asset ceiling beginning. So, the beginning asset ceiling, that's equal to 1 million times the discount rate. So, just in case na meron tayong discount rate dito na 10%, alright, interest expense, again, interest expense will be equal to 500,000 times 10%, or that's equal to 50,000. Okay? So, if 50,000 ang papasok sa employee benefit expense, the amount that will be included now sa remeasurement or OCI will only be equal to 450,000. That's the residual amount. Okay? So, here, if there will be an increase in the effect of asset ceiling, see to it that we need to recognize what? We need to recognize loss kasi mas malaki yung hindi natin pwedeng i-recognize na asset eh. But if there will be a decrease in the effect of asset ceiling, dun naman po tayo nagkakaroon ng gain. So these are the three components of remeasurements, and once again, remeasurement is part of other comprehensive income. Okay? Now, to apply all these concepts to the problems, let's now move on here in illustrative problem number 5. So, ilalagay ko dito, no, FVPA. Next, we have column for the PBO. We also have column for the employee benefit expense. Then, last but not the least, we have column for the remeasurements. Okay? So, here on January 1, 2017, Jonathan Company reported the following information in relation to a defined benefit plan. So, fair value of plan assets at the beginning is 7 million pesos. I'll put 7 million pesos here. PBO, on the other hand, is equal to 7.5 million pesos. And then, ano pang mga nangyari? During the current year, the entity determined that the current service cost is 1.4 million and the discount rate is 10%. Once again, current service cost is part of employee benefit expense. That's why that 1.4 million will be added here sa employee benefit expense. Aside from being part of expense, sabi natin kanina, part din po yan ng projected benefit obligation natin. So, plus 1.4 million din dito sa PBO. Okay? Next, given na yung ating discount rate, so we can now compute the interest income and the interest expense. So, interest income is equal to 7 million times 10%, or that's 700,000. So, I'll put 700,000 here in FVPA. Then, ibabawas natin yan sa employee benefit expense. Because once again, the component of employee benefit expense is the service cost, or the net, or the sum of the service cost and the net interest. Then, interest expense is 7.5 million times 10%, or that's 750,000. So, plus 750 here, then plus 750,000 here. Okay? Next, no meron. The actual return on plan assets was 840. Okay? So, 750 lang ang interest income, 700 lang ang interest income natin, 840 daw yung actual return. So, meron tayong gain na 140,000. So, the 140,000 gain is put under the column of remeasurement, and syempre, kulang yung naka-add sa FVPA. That's why, nag-add din ako ng 140 dito. As an alternative computation, see to it, no, that the 700 interest income and the gain of 140 can just be added, right, in a single amount or using a single amount, which is the actual return. So, 700 plus 140, yun din po yung 840,000 natin na actual return. So, okay lang din naman na instead of adding the interest income and the gain on return, just add the actual return para hindi na maraming computation. It's just that, syempre, magkaibang papasukan yan. Yung interest income, part ng employee benefit expense, pero yung gain on return, part ng remeasurements naman. Okay? Next, ano pang sabi? Other related information for the current year. Contribution to the plan, 1.2 million. See to it that this is part of FVPA because dinagdagan natin yung contribution eh. So, plus 1.2 million sa FVPA. Next, benefits paid to the retirees, 1.5 million. Pag nagbayad tayo, mababawasan ng PBO. So, minus 1.5 million. Saan kukunin ang pambayad? Sa FVPA. So, minus 1.5 million as well sa FVPA. Okay? Next, ano pang meron? Decreased in projected benefit obligation due to the changes in actuarial assumption. Nag-decrease ang PBO natin, so this is an actuarial gain. So if this is an actuarial gain, we'll add it here under remeasurements, and of course, we'll need to deduct that 200,000 here in PBO kasi nga, nabawasan ng PBO. Okay? Second to the last, present value of defined benefit obligation settled is 500,000. Once again, that is an item of deduction here in PBO. And then the settlement price of 400,000 is also an item of deduction dito sa FVPA kasi doon natin kukunin yung pambayad. Okay? So, if 500 ang ating binabayaran, 400 lang ang binayad, meron ngayon tayong gain on settlement. And gain on settlement is part of employee benefit expense. That's equal to 100,000. So, since gain yan and expense ito, see to it, na negative 100,000 dapat ito. Because we cannot add a gain to the total expense. So, how much now will be the ending balance of FVPA? That's equal to 7 million plus 700,000 plus 140,000 plus 1.2 million minus 1.5 million and then minus 400,000, or this is equal to 7,140,000 pesos. On the other hand, the ending balance of projected benefit obligation is equal to 7.5 million plus 1.4 million plus 750,000 minus 1.5 million minus 200,000 and then minus 500,000, or that's equal to 7,450,000 pesos. Okay? Employee benefit expense on the other hand is equal to 1.4 million minus 700,000 plus 750,000, then minus 100,000, or this is equal to 1,350,000 pesos. Then last but not the least, remeasurement is equal to 140,000 plus 200,000, or this is equal to 340,000 pesos. Are we good? So what will now be the journal entry here? The journal entry is to debit employee benefit expense equal to how much? Equal to 1,350,000 pesos. What else? Well, at the beginning of the year, mas mataas ang PBO ng 500. So we have accrued benefit expense and that's equal to 500,000. But at the end of the year, magkano na lang ang accrued? Well, ang accrued na lang natin is equal to magkano? Accrued benefit expense will now be equal to 7,450 minus 7,140 or 310,000 na lang. So, from 500, naging 310. So, babawasan natin si accrued. So, debit accrued benefit expense equal to the decrease of 190,000. Okay? Next, credit remeasurement gain equal to the total gain of 340,000. Then, last but not the least, is to credit cash for the contribution of 1.2 million pesos. So, that's the journal entry, no? Here in illustrative problem number 1. So let's now try to answer the requirements. Requirement number 1, what amount should be reported in the income statement for the current year as employee benefit expense? So here in number 1, our final answer is 1,350,000 pesos. Okay? Requirement number 2, what is the net amount of remeasurements for 2017? That's equal to 340,000 gain. So 340,000 gain is our final answer. Requirement 3, how much is the defined benefit cost? Once again, defined benefit cost, no, is just the difference or the sum between the employee benefit expense and the remeasurements. Since expense ito and this is a gain, kailangan natin silang i-offset. So 1,350 minus 340,000, our defined benefit cost is equal to 1,010,000. So I'll put 1,010,000 pesos here. Number 4, what is the fair value of planned assets on December 31, 2017? So FVPA at the end of the year is equal to 7,140. So 7,140, final answer. Number 5, what is the projected benefit obligation on December 31, 2017? Here our final answer is 7,450. So 7,450. Then last but not the least, what is the balance of the prepaid accrued benefit cost on December 31, 2017? So here our final answer is 310,000 accrued. So 310,000 accrued will be our final answer. So that's illustrative problem number 5. Okay? Now let's move on. Here in illustrative problem number 6. So ilalagay ko dito employee benefit expense, remeasurements, FVPA. Then last column will be the projected benefit obligation. So on January 1, 2017, Anchor Company had a projected benefit obligation of 10 million pesos. So PBO at the beginning is equal to 10 million pesos. And a pension fund with a fair value of 9.2 million. So 9.2 million will be our FVPA. The entity provided the following information related to the pension plan during the current year. Current service cost is 1.2 million. So part yan ng employee benefit expense at ng PBO. So, plus 1.2 million under the column of employee benefit expense and under the column of PBO. Actual return on the pension fund is 250. Once again, pwede nga na yan na lang ang i-add natin sa FVPA instead of adding the interest income and the gain or loss on returns. So, here to know how much will be the gain or loss on returns, let's compute first how much will be the interest income. We do not use or we no longer use expected return on pension fund. But instead, we only use the discount rate of 9%. So, 9.2 million times 9%, interest income is equal to 828. As we all know, that is an item of deduction sa employee benefit expense. So 828 expected return or interest income, then actual return is just equal to 250. Tama ba? So ang ibig sabihin ngayon dito, if we have an expected or interest income na 828 and then 250 lang actual, meron tayong loss which is equal to 578,000. So I'll put 578,000 here because that is a loss. Okay? Next, benefits paid to retirees is 1.1 million. Once again, that's an item of deduction here in FVPA. Joke lang, addition here in FVPA kasi, right? Tama, deduction. Item of deduction here in FVPA kasi nabawasan yung FVPA, nagbayad tayo. And at the same time, mababawasan din ng PBO kasi nga nakapagbayad na tayo. Okay? Contribution to the pension fund of 1,050,000 on the other hand is an item of addition. Then, that's it, no? Ang hindi na lang natin nailalagay is yung what? Is yung interest expense. How much is the interest expense? That's 10 million times 9% or that's 900,000. So, plus 900,000 here. Then, plus 900,000 din sa PBO. Okay? So, magkano ang employee benefit expense natin? This is equal to 1.2 million minus 828,000 and then plus 900,000 or this is equal to 1,272,000 pesos. Remeasurement, on the other hand, is equal to negative 578,000 or that is a loss. So, meron tayong defined benefit cost na magkano? 1,272 minus 570, plus 578 kasi loss and expense can be added. 1,272 plus 578 is actually equal to 1,850,000. So, kapag loss ang remeasurement, pwedeng i-add sa employee benefit expense. FVPA at the end is equal to 9.2 million plus 250,000 minus 110,000. Okay? Joke lang. Minus 1,100,000 and then plus 1,050,000 or this is equal to 9.4 million pesos. Then last for the PBO, this is equal to 10 million plus 1.2 million minus 1.1 million then plus 900,000 or this is equal to 11 million pesos. Mas malaki pa rin si PBO, so we have accrued benefit cost which is magkano yung accrued benefit cost? 11 million minus 9.4 million or that's equal to 1.6 million. So requirement number 1, what is the pension expense for the current year? Our final answer is equal to 1,272,000. Requirement 2, what is the remeasurement gain or loss on December 31, 2017? Final answer is 578,000 loss. Then requirement 3, what is the pension asset or liability on December 31, 2017? Our final answer is equal to the accrued benefit expense or cost of 1.6 million. So that's illustrative problem number 6. Okay? Now, try nating magsagot ng mga problems na workback. Starting with illustrative problem number 7. So, I'll put employee benefit expense here. Next, we have remeasurement. Column for the FVPA and another column for the PBO. Okay? So, Lonnie Company provided the following information related to a defined benefit plan for the year ended December 31, 2017. So, current service cost is equal to 30,000. As we all know, this is part of employee benefit expense and an item of addition to PBO. Benefits paid is 31,000. This is an item of deduction to both FVPA and PBO. Contribution to the fund, item of addition sa FVPA. Fair value of plan assets at the beginning is 2.1 million, while at the end of the year, magkano daw? That's equal to 2.4 million. Okay? PBO at the beginning is equal to 2.2 million pesos. Then apparently at the end of the year, that's equal to 2.5 million pesos. Then past service cost is equal to 115,000. As we all know, that's an item of addition sa EBE as well as an item of addition sa PBO. Okay? So the discount rate and the expected rate of return are 5% and 7% respectively. Pero discount rate na 5% ang ating kailangan. Maliwanag ba? So let's compute how much will be the interest income muna. Interest income is equal to 2.1 million times 5% or that's 105,000 pesos. Okay? Interest expense, on the other hand, is equal to 2.2 million times 5%, or that's 110,000 pesos. Itong 110 na to, i-add natin dito sa PBO. Pero yung 105, wag mo nang i-add sa FVPA so that yung amount na makompute natin dito is already what? Is already the actual return. Okay lang ba? Okay? So, ngayon ganito. Tanggalin ko to para hindi magulo. So, actual return na ang diretso natin ko-computein dito because one of the requirement in this problem is the actual return on plan assets. Okay? So, requirement number 1, what amount should be recognized as employee benefit expense in income statement for the current year? So, here our final answer will be equal to 30,000 plus 115,000 minus 105,000 then plus 110,000 or that's equal to 150,000 pesos. Liwanag ba? Next, requirement number 2, what is the actual return on plan assets? Actual return on plan assets is squeeze natin. So, 2.4 million minus 21,000 plus 31,000. Okay? Then, minus 2.1 million or this is equal to 310,000 pesos. So, requirement number 2, 310,000 will be the final answer. So, if 310 ng actual, interest income is 105, meron tayong gain which is equal to magkano yung gain? Meron tayong gain na lalagay sa remeasurement equal to 205,000. This is computed by deducting from the 310,000 the interest income of 105,000. Requirement 3, what is the actuarial loss arising from the increase in PBO? So here, squeeze ulit natin itong actuarial loss na to. Okay? So 2.5 million minus 110,000 minus 115,000 plus 31,000 minus 30,000 and then minus 2.2 million. So, magkano yung actuarial loss natin? That's equal to 76,000 pesos. So, requirement number 3, 76,000, final answer. Actuarial loss to, so minus naman dito sa remeasurement. Requirement 4, what is the net remeasurement gain or loss? Well, meron tayong gain na 205,000, then loss na 76,000. So, this is a net gain of 129,000. So, 129,000 gain will be the final answer for requirement 4. Then, for requirement 5, what amount should be reported as prepaid or accrued benefit cost on December 31, 2017? Well, December 31, 2017, FVP is 2.4 million, while PBO is 2.5. So, meron tayong accrued benefit expense equal to magkano? That's equal to 100,000. So, requirement number 5, 100,000 accrued will be the final answer. Okay? So, that's illustrative problem number 7. Now, let's move on to the last problem. That's illustrative problem number 8. Okay? So, here in illustrative problem number 8, lagay muna natin ulit yung mga column, no? Employee benefit expense, remeasurements, ano pa? FVPA, then last but not the least will be the column for the projected benefit obligation. Okay? So, Gracie Company provided the following information in relation to a defined benefit plan for the current year. So, on January 1, we have fair value of plan assets na 2.6 million. Then, we have PBO as well, equal to magkano? Equal to 2 million pesos. Very good. Now, at the end of the year, given na rin yung ending balances ng mga to. 3 million for the FVPA, 2.1 million for the PBO. So, I'll put 3 million here, and then 2.1 million here sa PBO. Okay? Now, anong meron? Supposedly, we have prepaid or accrued benefit cost equal to 600 and 900 dapat. But, there is an asset ceiling of 200 and 300. So, the effect of asset ceiling is 400,000 and 600,000. That's why, if tinanong tayo how much will be the prepaid benefit expense at the end of the year, see to it that our answer will only be equal to 300,000 because yun lang yung limit. Okay? Next, current service cost is 100,000. As we all know, this is an item of addition to employee benefit expense and to projected benefit obligation. Next, contribution to the plan is 350,000. So, plus 350,000 here in FVPA. Okay? Next, benefits paid is 150,000. So, minus 150,000 here in FVPA. Then, minus 150,000 as well here in PBO because nagbayad tayo eh. Then, discount rate is 10%. So how much will be the interest income? That's 2.6 million times 10%, or we have interest income of 260,000. So minus 260 here in employee benefit expense. Huwag mo nang i-add yun dito sa FVPA para yung mako-compute natin ditong amount will already be actual return. Alright? Next, ano pang meron? Interest expense will be equal to 3 million times 10%, or that's equal to 300,000. Well, itong 300,000 na to, item of addition din siya sa PBO. Maliwanag ba? Next, kunin natin yung interest on the effect of asset ceiling. 400,000 times 10%, meron tayong interest na magkano? The interest is equal to 40,000 pesos, so in-add din yan sa EBE. So here, the change in the effect of asset ceiling is 200,000. So, if interest expense is equal to 40,000 pesos, see to it that the increase in the change in the effect of asset ceiling is equal to 160,000 pesos. So, itong 160 na to, yan yung ilalagay natin dito sa remeasurement. This is a loss kasi nag-increase, so negative. Okay? So, requirement number 1, what is the actual return on planned assets for the current year? Squeeze lang ulit natin. 3 million plus 150,000 minus 350,000, then minus 2.6 million. Our final answer now will be equal to 200,000. So, requirement number 1, 200,000 will be the final answer. Requirement 2, what is the actuarial gain due to decrease in PBO? But before that, compute muna natin yung gain or loss on return. Actual return, 200. 260 ang interest income natin. Ibig sabihin, mas malaki yung interest income compared sa actual. So, meron ulit tayong loss and that's equal to 60,000 pesos. Okay? Next, compute natin yung actuarial gain. So, actuarial gain can be computed by squeezing it from the column of PBO. So, 2.1 million minus 300,000 plus 150,000 minus 100,000 and then minus 2 million pesos, or this is equal to 150,000 pesos. Okay? So, our final answer here in number 2 will be equal to 150,000 pesos. This is an actuarial gain naman. So, dito natin yung i-add sa remeasurement. So, plus 150,000. Okay? Next, requirement 3. What amount should be reported as employee benefit expense? Magkano employee benefit expense? That's 100,000 minus 260 plus 300,000 and then plus 40,000, or this is equal to 180,000 pesos. So, requirement number 3, 180,000, final answer. Then last but not the least, requirement 4, what is the net remeasurement loss for the current year? Our final answer is 160,000 loss, negative less 60,000 and then plus 150,000, or this will give us a net loss of 70,000 pesos. So, final answer here will be equal to 70,000 pesos. So, that's illustrative problem number 8, and this will be the end of our discussion for post-employment benefits. Hopefully, marami ka natutunan sa discussion natin for today. Ingat ka palagi. God bless, guys. Bye-bye!